So hello, welcome. This is Headlocks and Headphones, the 30th of October, 2020. Coming up today, of course, we have the wrestling news. We have what happened at Hell in a Cell. We also will have what happened on Raw and SmackDown. Now, in addition to that, we're also going to have a little bit of what happened in some of the other shows. I'm going to say a little bit. We're not going to do too much of it. We're going to look at it as part of the wrestling news section because there's something interesting happened in Impact. One of my predictions for AEW has come true, and obviously we're going to look at the ratings battle between NXT and AEW as well. As far as Jim Ross is concerned, it's pretty one-sided, and it's fair to say, yeah, one company has the majority of the victories. But this week, we will look at what the ratings were for the Halloween Havoc special and the pre-taped AEW, and we will hopefully have a little discussion about exactly why the ratings are the way they are. Apart from that, we also have that one little cool thing I was talking about on Twitter. So somebody from the CWF, Caledonian Wrestling Federation, who are our sponsors, sent me some pictures that I probably shouldn't have. And, you know, as a person who's done some journalism in the past, it would be bad of me not to share these with you all, right? So later in the show, I'm going to share with you the exclusive pictures that I censored on Twitter. I'm going to let you see exactly what it is I was sent. And that's going to be coming up later in the show. That is obviously going to anger our sponsors. And quite frankly, I could not give a damn. So it was a big week for the WWE. Their third quarter profits are good. It looks like WWE are on a roll. We did discuss this last week about why they would sack people if there was no need. But during the conference call this week, yesterday, in fact, as we record, Thursday the 29th, it was announced that by Nick Khan, the President and Chief Revenue Officer. Isn't it interesting how one of the presidents of the WWE, last name is Khan? Anyway, they revealed that there will be a multi-part documentary coming to Netflix that will be based upon the WWE chairman, Vince McMahon. No cost is being spared as WWE look to make this one of the biggest and most elaborate documentaries ever. Bear in mind, we've never seen behind the scenes with Vince McMahon. We've seen little bits here and there with Beyond the Mat. We've seen Vince McMahon in interviews in various places where he's very protective of the company. I would assume WWE have got some level of creative control over what goes out in this documentary, but it'll be interesting to see exactly what's there. The details for when this is coming out is pretty sketchy right now. However, to give you some context about how good this is likely to be, Bill Simmons, the producer, the executive producer to be exact, is not somebody who's coming at this with no background. He's been a producer for 30 for 30. He's been a writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live. He's produced documentaries like the 30 for 30's Soccer Stories, Million Dollar Arm. In addition to that, he's also the guy who produced the Andre the Giant documentary, one that was very well received and had a massive budget. If you've never seen the Andre the Giant documentary, go out of your way to catch it. I believe at one point it was free on YouTube. I don't know if it's still there. But this is a guy who he knows not to get involved in projects that are going to suck. He also requires a massive budget because he really wants his projects to be an intense look at the person he's looking at. The Andre the Giant documentary, for example, actually had visits to places and conversations with people we've never seen before. So the production on that one was incredible. Now we move on to somebody from AEW, Jake Hager, who actually had a UFC fight at Bellator 250. The pictures of the state of his face, you would think he lost, but in the end, he actually won the fight. The interesting thing here is he faced fellow undefeated heavyweight Brandon Carlton, somebody who's actually deemed to not be a name at all. So for the fact, quite simply, that he won that fight is a good thing for him. Although his opponent is relatively unknown, Jake Hager walked out, albeit a bit bruised and battered. It was a split decision with the judges, but if you go on Twitter, a lot of people saying that the judges were were bribed, because there were sections of that fight that Colton dominated. However, some of the wrestling guys who take a dabbling interest, they're saying that Jake Hager actually did win the fight. There just was sections that Colton looked like he was the better guy. To be honest, looking at Jake Hager's face, which you're going to see just now, he is not looking like a winner, but I'm sure his paycheck will be telling him otherwise. Now, the rumors coming from the NWA with the loss of the NWA title, Thunder Rosa, it looked like she was heading out of the NWA, because here's somebody you would want to have carrying that belt heading forward. However, the relationship with AEW appears to be bearing fruit for AEW as well, as they now have Serena Deeb, who is the NWA champion, and has actually been working with AEW as well. There was a story this week that she was heading to the WWE, Thunder Rosa, that is. The issue here is that it looks like that's not entirely true. Apparently, according to Billy Corgan, her contract is right through 2021, which means we will not be seeing Thunder Rosa anywhere else other than perhaps sporadic appearances around the world. She will not be appearing in WWE and will not be becoming a full-time AEW talent. So that's interesting that Billy Corgan's been able to tie somebody like Thunder Rosa down, particularly during the pandemic. You would be surprised if certain people didn't want to just guarantee their income, but I'm assuming the NWA have very good methods for making sure these people are making money. I did see Thunder Rosa was doing a virtual signing with the High Spots, I think it was, the other week. So hopefully none of these guys and girls, I keep doing this and calling them guys, none of these people are going to be losing so much money that they leave the business, because somebody like Thunder Rosa, clearly a good talent, someone who very nearly joined the WWE. The only reason she didn't join the WWE was because the trial she was offered was only as a referee. I say only, you're in the system, at least then you could impress, but she didn't want to take the job as a referee. She wanted to try her hand as a wrestler full time. So honestly, I think WWE missed out there. Thunder Rosa is a great in-ring talent, and she's not from one background. Her background's a little bit diverse, which means she can play something a little bit different. So quite interesting to see what Thunder Rosa is going to do in the NWA as their tapings return and they start to air more shows. I certainly think her not being the women's champion did lead a lot of people to suspect she was going, but it's good to hear that the NWA have been able to keep a hold of somebody. Now, for next week, the WWE show The Bump have announced that they have a massive return on their show. No, it's not Undertaker. It's somebody who eliminated The Undertaker from a Royal Rumble. Yes, you guessed it. It's Maven. Quite frankly, one of my favorite theme songs in WWE history is the Maven one, which was actually the Tough Enough one. So he wrestled for WWE from 2001 to 2005. He also had a brief stint in TNA and some independents. He's appeared on mostly TV shows since he left WWE, including The Surreal Life. And he also did a automated cat litter tray on the Home Shopping Network. I'm just saying, the guy's been through some shit. Okay, that was a bad joke. But he actually has been through some shit. Apparently, he's had some drug and alcohol issues over the years. Appears to have himself back on a level playing field with everybody else and has his demons under control, which is great to hear. Maven is somebody that when I was watching Tough Enough, I thought he was going to be a huge star. I think the only thing that let Maven down was perhaps the lack of competition. As he was coming in, WCW disappeared. There was not a lot of places on that roster for people to improve. I think with the development system that they have now, Maven is somebody that would be in the same place as Velveteen Dream. There we go. I was going to just call him Patrick Clark because that was the name that popped to my head. Another Tough Enough alumni. But very interesting to see what's happening with all of this. Now, there's one quite interesting thing here is the WWE and their desire to control people. So let's go with the first story on this. During a Twitch stream on Thursday night, Paige was talking about horror films, and several viewers started sending her multiple messages about WWE stars AJ Styles, Cesaro, Mayhem, who'd all suspended their Twitch accounts. She was taken aback by this, and she instantly made a statement on her Twitch channel. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the statement out, and there's swear words in there, so let's get through this and realize that there's going to be some swearing. You guys, we have to make this. You guys, there may be a time where I have to stop streaming. So I think just in case I walk away, I have to walk away. Let's make these next 2 streams crazy. I have to go off. If I have to leave, we have to make today and Saturday fucking crazy before I have to leave, because it might have to come to that. So what's quite interesting here is she's streaming and isn't fully aware of the situation. A WWE employee who by this point should have been told one way or another whether she has to stop streaming. You have others, AJ Styles, etc., who've built up a massive audience in their Twitch, and they're not using it to generate lots of revenue. They're doing it so they can have some fun, have some downtime, and interact with fans. And AJ Styles has used it to kind of vent frustration about what happened with the Good Brothers and Paul Heyman and various other things in recent months. So it's quite interesting to see that AJ Styles, Maya Yim, etc., seem to have the information, and maybe Paige doesn't. There was something interesting that happened after that, though. She then received a text from someone and was texting back and forth. She walked past her green screen to go out of view, kind of like this type of, just left the screen. When she returned, she appeared upset and continued texting and walking off and on camera. And when she came back, she said, again, I'm going to read this as it happened. So there's a lot of, when someone's emotional, things get a little bit broken up. So let's just go with what's there. It's quite long, but I think it's important to go with it because this is somebody who clearly didn't understand what the hell was going on. And she's under contract and she is a dreamer. I've honestly got to the point I cannot deal with this company anymore. So now I have to make a very important decision. I'm fucking tired. I broke my fucking neck twice for this company. Over fucking worked. I broke my neck twice for this company. All I wanted was to... They don't realize that this community is just about fucking subs. It isn't about that. We built a wonderful community, a wonderful fucking family where this is an escape for a lot of people, including myself. I can't wrestle anymore. I was worked so hard in WWE that I can't wrestle anymore. My whole dreams got taken away from me, and I had to have something that fulfilled even a small part of the huge fucking void. A huge fucking void. I couldn't wrestle anymore. Something I lived, breathed, fucking shit wrestling since I was a fetus, and it got ripped away from me. And I understand if they're like, hey, if you're wrestling every day, if you're doing shows every day, if you're on TV constantly, that's fine. But I'm an injured wrestler. I can't wrestle anymore. I get used for media stuff sometimes. But at the end of the day, I'm in my house. I'm going fucking crazy. I need something to keep me sane. And Twitch was my escape from that. Now, if we leave it there, that's one thing. So let's go with the last little paragraph, because again, I think this is important if we're looking at a lot of people online are criticizing WWE. And a lot of people are criticizing WWE because they believe this is about the money. So let's look at the last little bit of what Paige said. I had a terrible couple of years where I had a tape leaked about me, where I popped a couple of drug tests because I was in an abusive relationship. And that's the only thing I could do. People think I should be thankful that I still have a job. And I am, but it doesn't mean I should be treated like fucking shit. Paige has had a really dark couple of years where, yes, she was taking drugs. Yes, she was in a relationship a lot of people disapproved of and probably shouldn't have been in with Alberto Del Rio. She was also going through the mental anguish of her neck injury and dealing with several different circumstances all at the same time. So to see what she's going through in terms of she's not being used by WWE. She's not on TV. She gets people who are being used every week being required to maybe not be as accessible to keep the mystique. That's fine. It's clear from what she's saying. She gets that. The thing that's pissing her off is the fact that she's not being used. She isn't on TV. She gets used for media here and there. So to her, she's keeping her name out there on the off chance that they may want to use her in the future. It's beneficial to WWE to have her streaming. But ignore the business side of things. She's basically locked in her house with no job. That, she's got money coming in, but she's got no job to go to. She's got nothing to focus on. This gives her something to focus on. She continued streaming for a couple of hours. And then at one point she said, I'm going to keep streaming. We'll see how it goes. So I think Paige could be the one that makes the stand here. And if WWE end up releasing her or, taking money off her for it, then this is going to be a very, very big backlash. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if you go back and watch a few shows back, I disagreed with what some people said. So some people said that WWE were well within their rights to stop these people streaming. Others said the WWE had no right to because it's their private life, and as long as they don't use their stage name, they should be fine. To a large degree, I pretty much agree with that second one. If you're not using your stage name, then WWE don't have a case as far as I'm concerned. But with Lana, she was listing herself as a WWE superstar. She was also advertising energy drinks, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but WWE have sponsorship deals. WWE have contracts and deals with companies. And if employees work for other companies, that kind of is detrimental to their contract. So I see what WWE are trying to do in one way, protecting their sponsorship deals. But there's an easy way around that. Just tell people don't take sponsorship deals on your Twitch. If people want to send you stuff, that's fine. But don't take sponsorship deals from companies that may conflict with us. Or let WWE put sponsorship deals in there. Everybody can work together and everybody can grow. Great. Instead, what we have is WWE just making people stop twitching. Now, by the look of it, Paige is going to continue with her streaming, and she's going to let WWE come for her. This is a girl who has been through so much, and if this is an escape for her, I don't care which company it is, WWE, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, I don't give a crap. This is an escape for somebody who has dealt with issues that the vast majority of us will never have to. So to see WWE treating her in the way that they are is ridiculous. I am a WWE fan. Everybody who watches this show will know that. But this is crossing a line. I get wanting to protect money, protect sponsorship deals, perhaps prevent overexposure. But what you have here is you don't have the SmackDown audience tuning in to watch Paige. What you have is this mixture of people who see a beautiful girl, they see a former wrestler, they link to her from watching Raw or SmackDown. There's a combination, and there's also people who watch her streams because of being recommended by people, or the fact that she actually is pretty honest in her stream and says things that most people don't really do because she's not on TV every week, so she can be a bit more accessible. This also happens to be somebody who's a really, really big name for British wrestling. To basically demand that these people step away and stop streaming, WWE, it's a dick move. I mean, it's not Joey Ryan level dick move, I don't think, but it's still a dick move. Let's try and move past it, though, because I got a little angry last week with Joey Ryan. I've also been, tweeting Joey Ryan. I may be pushing his button to see if that cunt will sue. Person will sue me. Don't want to use the C word too often, but he is. He's a CUNT. Now, according to Fightful, WWE pulled Xia Li's amateur kickboxing fight. They'd only heard about it when the news surfaced online, which was just days before it was supposed to happen. And while many in WWE understood why the company pulled her from the event, Li was said to have been upset and didn't understand why, thinking the WWE wasn't giving her respect. Now, this is in direct contrast to the Paige situation. Xia Li's in the wrong here. Yes, I agree. Talents should be able to take outside bookings. But when WWE are having to protect their workers by installing protective bubbles, which even they aren't working, WWE will be the first to admit the bubble system isn't working. But when they have a bubble system designed to protect their workers and workers are going and training with other people, because clearly she has to be training, they're not in the WWE bubble, so she's breaking the rules. In addition to that, she's taken fights with outside organizations, which could lead to her being unable to fulfill her obligations with WWE. Again, her first obligation is with the company that's paying her wage. I believe also the reason why she has a visa is the WWE. This is not a political statement about the visa. I mean, the visa would be tied to the job that she has with WWE. I believe, because of her nationality, that's the case. Drew McIntyre had visa issues as a result of changes to his employment when he left WWE. So I'm assuming there's a lot more to this story that's going to come. But Xia Li's in the wrong in this one. She shouldn't be in a position where she's taking bookings with other companies without informing her employer. As a person who's done radio in the past, if I were working for Radio 1 and Radio 1 are paying me a full-time wage and I suddenly take on a gig in Aberdeen, where I am based, that could potentially inhibit my ability to do the main job or potentially mean I can't travel to do my main job, that's something you need to inform your employer about, particularly if there's a bubble system in place and I'm meant to only do radio shows with a group of people and I'm now taking on a gig with somebody else. This is the opposite of the Paige situation. Xia Li's in the wrong, that one. If you disagree, that's fine, but she is in the wrong. Now, it was reported this week that Matt Riddle has had a name change. Don't worry, he hasn't been given the gimmick of the rapist. Apparently, WWE don't want to address that topic. They have, however, dropped the name Matt. He is now just known as Riddle. What's really interesting, apparently Vince is the one that made this change. And it was Matt Riddle that went on Twitter and basically said, listen, I've been known as Riddle my whole life. I really don't give a crap. This isn't important. People need to chill. I agree. Matt Riddle being shortened to Riddle, I can see why they would do it in a marketing strategy. But at the end of the day, there's still too much of a cloud hanging over his head. I like his work. There's something there about him. But unless there was to be something turning around and saying there was a huge misunderstanding, which I don't know how you would do that based on the accusations, but certainly if I was in charge of WWE, you'd be wanting to step away from using Matt Riddle. Now, WWE have been very careful about who they've been hiring in the UK in the past few months. And one of the names that has cropped up that is coming to NXT UK, and by the way, he is looking in probably the best shape I've seen him in for a long time, is Rampage Brown. Rampage Brown coming to NXT UK. That is a huge signing for them. Not only is this a guy who in-ring knows what he's doing, this is a guy who, if you look at all the big successful shows that have happened across the United Kingdom, Rampage Brown is generally a name that's on there. He's somebody who has created quite a name for himself in the UK scene. And hopefully NXT UK will get him a chance to be a little bit different, because that's kind of the intention that I think WWE have for NXT UK. They don't want to have all the guys look like Randy Orton. They want to have a mixture of talent. And hopefully there's enough guys left in the UK scene to actually be able to book shows, particularly if our sponsor is booking shows. Then CWF are going to need a couple of big names to latch onto. The loss of Rampage Brown could impact CWF negatively. However, I'm very happy for Rampage Brown in the sense that here's a guy who's bust his ass. Hopefully he finally gets that reward from wrestling. Now we move on. We were talking about Xia Li. We were talking about the fact that WWE have bubbles. Now, according to Wrestling Observer Radio, it was a coach at NXT that tested positive, and that's what forced several people involved with NXT to quarantine, which left them unavailable for Halloween Havoc. Most, but not all of the people were those who had not made it to television yet. So NXT has quite a big roster, and most of them aren't on TV. The report would also state most people who appear on TV were there and none of them tested positive. The only name that was booked at Halloween Havoc but wasn't there was Indy Hartwell. We'll discuss more about him later on. But the interesting thing that I think here is the WWE are basically responding to this in the same way that the UK is. They are trying to avoid a complete lockdown, which I think in many ways is clever in the long term. I think in the short term, you're going to have lots of mini lockdowns for WWE where certain talents are just pulled from TV, and it's a complicated and difficult system to administer because they could be in a position in a few years where they've never quite fully got through this. WWE are the first ones to admit live shows might not come back next year because there's just no way of knowing exactly what's going to be happening with coronavirus. So obviously, with our sponsor trying to launch shows next year as well, it's going to be interesting to see. WWE are the standard bearer, and I think once bigger companies start taking the risk, then you can understand smaller companies running shows with numbers enough to generate income. But I think for the minute, you look around the UK especially, and there are shows that are being run. There's a few shows here and there that were run before the recent lockdown measures were increased. And they were relatively small numbers, and they seem to have run relatively successfully. Alternatively, you have the collective events that were run in America, where you had quite a few cases that were positives there. The concern as somebody who is a fan of wrestling is, would I attend a wrestling show whilst this is still a thing? Would I be a person who would think, right, take a vaccine and then possibly attending a wrestling show? It's a complicated system. It's a complicated place to be in. I would hate to be a wrestling promoter right now because the gamble that's associated with even just running a show, never mind the money side, just morally running a show, potentially putting people in danger. It's a huge thing to do, and I think anybody who is running a show right now, credit to you. There's a big hurdle for people to overcome. But let's try and step away from COVID, because COVID is a bastard. It has ruined many things and made even university really hard. Let's look at one of the bad news stories of this week. Now, for me, growing up, I was a huge fan of Tracy Smothers. Tracy Smothers and Armstrong were a tag team in WCW that I was a fan of. You then had Tracy Smothers in WWF, then Tracy Smothers in the Full Blooded Italians. And for me, one of the things that kind of summed it up for me, if you've never seen it, Grado and Tracy Smothers did a little mini documentary that was centered around a match that Grado and Tracy Smothers did in America. And what was really cool was Grado tried to do a lot of the stuff that really works in Britain, and every time he did it, he's like, "Oh crap, man, that stuff works in Scotland. It works, man. I don't understand why it's not working." But there was just so much comedy and humor that Tracy Smothers and Grado were able to play off each other. And Tracy hasn't looked the physical strength that he was in the 90s. In recent years, he has appeared to be struggling physically. So when it was announced that he was ill, it was a crying shame, obviously. Tracy Smothers is somebody who, he's only 58 years old. He's just passed. He has impacted so many people. And this is one of those instances where sometimes somebody makes such an impact on the business without ever actually being a main event guy. Now, he main evented shows all across America, but smaller indie shows. Here's a guy who never main evented a WWE show, but let's kind of go through a few of the names and a few of the comments that have been made about him. Jeff Jarrett. First time I met Tracy, I was 14 and he was 19 at the Nashville Fairgrounds. He was getting trained by Tojo Yamamoto, and I was allowed to watch the training sessions every Saturday. Great talent and an even better human being. You then had Mikey Whipwreck, who worked with him in ECW. You were always willing to help anyone and everyone. Loved to laugh and stir things up. I remember numerous times he'd watch my match and offer advice, and an all-around great guy. Sad day for sure. Hashtag hold my watch. Ron Fuller. Sorry to hear about Tracy Smothers. He was a great worker and maybe an even better person. Enjoyed working with him and Steve Armstrong as the wild-eyed Southern boys. He will be missed and sadly gone much too young. 58 is nothing, man. 58 is nothing. I'm 36. So, he's 22 years older than me and he's gone. Chris Hero. My heart is broken. I loved Tracy Smothers very much. I met Tracy on a one-off show in Wisconsin when I was 19, shared a locker room with him regularly when I was 21, and had the privilege to step in the ring with him a number of times. He was always selfless and kind-hearted. We go on to Nyla Rose. I'm not going to say anything nice about Tracy Smothers. He'd be pissed at me for breaking kayfabe. But understand this, he was a real one, looked out for me, and helped me multiple times on his own kindness. There are many stories about Tracy Smothers and the fact that he was just so random, but he was funny. And that's kind of the important thing here. Matt Seidel posted, Tracy Smothers passed away today and it breaks my heart. I was lucky to be on shows with him from a young age and even luckier to have him as a friend. His wild-eyed spirit lives on in wrestlers like me and Eddie Kingston. We will make him proud tonight. One of the things that kind of intrigues me is Tracy Smothers, like I said, never a top guy. But you look at the guys that were influenced by him, you look at the guys that had quite a lot of respect for him and see the impact he had. He helped people. He was one of those guys that got people through their formative years. One of the people that I did see that wasn't mentioned there that was really nice about Tracy Smothers was Edge. And he talked about the fact that on his first tour, Tracy Smothers was the one that helped him find rooms to stay in for free to save some money, bought him food and looked after him. Tracy didn't have to do all these things. And there's countless people in wrestling who don't do these things. The fact that Tracy did these things and showed that, you know, he'd been to WCW, he'd been to WWF, he'd been in ECW, he'd been in all three of the major companies and toured the indies constantly after he left them. So there's a guy who, a crying shame that he's gone. If you've never seen any Tracy Smothers matches, please go out of your way. Particularly the FBI stuff's really funny. But if you look for the Grado match that he did, you'll be highly amused by that. Now, let's move on. According to Fightful, Chelsea Green was called up to the main roster back in May after her matches with Charlotte. And then when Paul Heyman was removed from his role in June, plans regarding Green on the main roster were put on hold. Now, Vanessa Bourne is another talent who was called up as well, but creative hadn't come up with anything for her. Now, Chelsea did respond by saying she hadn't wrestled since May the 27th. It's a crying shame. Chelsea is one of those talents that when she was signed, I thought, that's great. She's somebody that's going to do a lot. There seems to be, maybe the pandemic is just forcing WWE to change how they're booking stuff, which is a crying shame, sadly. But that is, of course, the wrestling news. So, in the TV section, normally what we do is Raw, SmackDown, actually in the other order. So SmackDown, Raw, and then we do AEW. Obviously, we're not doing AEW just now. I've been kind of keeping an eye on Impact, but not watching the full shows. What I do want to talk about briefly before we go into Raw, etc., is to talk about the fact that a few weeks ago we made predictions for the finals of the World Title Tournament in AEW, the 735th tournament AEW have run since they started. And I predicted Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page for the finals. It made the most sense. I'm not a genius. I'm not very clever. I'm not super intelligent about all this. But yeah, it did bring the two former tag partners and tag champions together. And that looks like being one hell of an exciting match between the two of them. I'm looking forward to it because it's a chance for me to either eat my words or prove my point. I don't think Kenny Omega is as good as other people do. And that's not to say that I don't think he's good. The problem for me is I believe that his best matches have come against better talent. I believe that talent have pulled him up. I don't believe he's done as good a job of pulling other talent up with him. I believe when he's been in against lower talent, the matches have suffered. Maybe Kenny Omega isn't booking the matches properly in the sense that he's trying to make the other person look good at the expense of either the match or him. Or conversely, my theory, which is that he's going in against better guys who are elevating him, which shows he's capable of being that good, which means I'm not saying he's not good. I'm saying that Kenny Omega needs to be in with somebody who's better than him to demonstrate exactly how good he is and raise his game. But in theory, that's going to be a solid match that I'm going to be excited to see what happens. Now, in Impact, we did see The Rock appear as part of the Hall of Fame ceremony for Ken Shamrock, which was a huge deal for WWE, even bigger deal for Ken Shamrock to get an old friend in to introduce him. But the revelation this week, tonight's episode of Impact, was a wedding ceremony for Johnny Bravo and Rosemary. And they were due to tie the knot. The ceremony broke into chaos and even ended in a murder. There was Hornswoggle, Father James Mitchell, who is the Sinister Minister. If you haven't seen this, it's actually hilarious and probably not for all the right reasons. It's pretty cheesy, and sometimes cheesy is okay. I said this about Chris Jericho and MJF last week. Go out of your way to check it out. Even if you don't like it, you can actually have a little laugh about it because it's kind of cheesy, but they're trying to present it in a serious way, which I think it really helps the segment. Now, the Undisputed Era have been feuding past couple of months with Pat McAfee, and this week Pat McAfee kind of revealed that Danny Burch and Oney Larkin are his team. By the way, huge fan of Danny Burch, Martin Stone. As you can tell, he's inspired at least one thing about me. Great talent, great talker, great in the ring. He's insanely good in the ring. So to see the Oney Larkin and Danny Burch tag team as tag team champions is great. What was even more interesting was as they were outnumbering Kyle O'Reilly, you actually saw Pat McAfee, Danny Burch, and Oney Larkin looking like they were going to destroy him. And out came Pete Dunne with 2 steel chairs, handed one to Kyle O'Reilly. Boom, straight in the back of Kyle O'Reilly. He is now with Pat McAfee. Pete Dunne looks insane. He looks so good right now. It's only going to be good for these three. I think Oney Larkin, somebody, you know what, take or leave Oney Larkin largely over the past year. In the past couple of months, nothing's changed about him that's changed my opinion other than his booking. He's always been a good wrestler. Never been a massive fan of his talking ability, but being put with Danny Burch, certainly seeing improvement in what he's doing. And to add Pete Dunne into that little stable, that's a huge deal. Plus, you also have the ability for Mustache Mountain to be added back in. British Strong Style perhaps could become part of the team or feud with them, feeling Pete Dunne betrayed them. So that is the intriguing stuff that happened on those shows. Now at NXT Halloween Havoc, there was a new North American champion. There was several quality matches that took place on the show. Now we did mention Indy Hartwell. Indy Hartwell was meant to be involved in the title match that gave Johnny Gargano the title. However, because he's been quarantined, we ended up having the Scream ghost face mask instead. It could potentially still be revealed as Indy Hartwell down the line. It gives WWE the scope to be able to, if things need to change, they can actually do it the way they want to, or they can go down another route and bring somebody else in. It's interesting. It in some ways helps protect Damian Priest because he didn't entirely lose the belt clean. But we did see the spin the wheel make the deal at Halloween Havoc. And the last time I enjoyed that was the Jake Snake Sting match in 92. Trying to remember off the top of my head. Yeah, it was 92 because he had his match against Taker at WrestleMania and then he left for WCW. Anyway, so far, I've been a huge fan of Johnny Gargano. I just don't like his wife. Not on a personal level. It's not like that. It's going to be intriguing to see where they go with this title. But that has been the other shows. Let's move on to SmackDown and Raw before we do Hell in a Cell. Okay, so we're not going to spend a massive amount of time on SmackDown. It was the go-home show for the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about the Hell in a Cell, where I get to complain about a few things and praise a few things as well. But one of the interesting things we have to realize about WWE is they have this really bad habit of screwing up the go-home shows. But they did have a really cool segment on SmackDown where you had what we thought was Jey Uso talking, but he was wearing a bandana over everything but his eyes, and his comments were basically, you should tell that to Jey, and then pull the mask down to reveal it was Jimmy. Jey standing behind him, who beats up Roman Reigns. Clever, been done before. It's amusing. It's interesting to see WWE giving the Usos a chance to shine. I'm a massive fan of the Usos, have been since day one. So when I saw them, I was more excited for their Hell in a Cell match. I thought, they'd already kind of destroyed Jey in the first one. But what they did was they showed that he had fight, and the fact that he's come back afterwards is showing more fight. So we'll talk more about that match, which actually opened the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. We then had the KO show with Daniel Bryan as the guest, which ended up in a big schmoz, a big fight. And we saw Daniel Bryan, Kevin Owens, and the Street Profits defeat Dolph Ziggler, Robert Roode, Cesaro, and Nakamura. I still think Kevin Owens is better as a heel, but it's interesting to see that that's the mid-card and upper mid-card in SmackDown, and that's pretty damn solid. If you were to put Daniel Bryan, Kevin Owens, Dolph Ziggler into a world title match, it would not look out of place. Would it be a hugely successful storyline? I don't think it would get you the ratings that you would get from what the Jey Uso storyline's doing, but still. We also had the Law and Otis, which was the court case involving The Miz and Otis. Amusing, but largely throwaway. I know I've said, cheesy is usually okay, but this was not all that funny. They were hammering home the idea, the rib that JBL was the one who took charge of Wrestlers Court back in the day. But, with the bailiff being Ron Simmons, who, when the verdict was handed down, said, damn, you could predict all that. You could also predict the fact that, Otis had the benefit of all the evidence in his favor. And JBL even said, he won the match fair and square. So on that basis alone, I have to award it to The Miz, which is exactly what JBL would do. He's a heel. He's a piece of shit. Of course he's going to award it to The Miz, even though he doesn't like The Miz, and he threw The Miz out the locker room on SmackDown. Again, only a hardcore fan is going to kind of know that story. So for the hardcore fan, that's amusing. But for everybody else, it makes no sense for an ex-guy to come back and do this. But Bianca Belair defeated Zelina Vega. Lars Sullivan defeated Shorty G. We also saw Shorty G say he was quitting WWE. There was an assault by Sasha Banks on Bayley to force her to sign the contract for the Hell in a Cell match. Seth Rollins defeated Murphy. Aaliyah and Dominic came to Murphy's aid. I really like the fact that now Dominic's kind of helping out in that storyline. Hopefully that story ends quite soon. And for me, the beatdown of Roman Reigns heading into the pay-per-view showed that there was every chance that he was going to have a good chance to win. Now, let's look at the match card that we had for Hell in a Cell. Now, I'm going to be honest, 7 matches, one of which was on the pre-show. R-Truth defeated Drew Gulak for the 24/7 championship, the usual little cluster at the end with everybody chasing him out. And then we open the show with Roman Reigns versus Jey Uso. Now, this is the part where I'm going to sit back just for a second, because I know Jim Cornette hated this match. He said the first half was good, the second half was too long. Personally, I really, really enjoyed this match. I did see CWF tweeted, good luck following this match. Now, I agree with that. Whoever is going to be in a match after something like this is going to struggle. For me, the ending story where you saw Jimmy Uso come out, and Jimmy's just had an operation, and he's saying to Roman, listen, we got you. We're still family. It doesn't have to be this way. And Roman broke down in tears, and I'm sitting like this. I'm going, this is probably the best piece of storytelling WWE have done in years. And we see fans constantly screaming for long-term or long-form stories, and this could be leading to the biggest long-form story of all, which is The Rock returning and fighting to be the tribal chief. But what we saw was just this moment between family members, and it was uncomfortable, and not in a bad way. It was uncomfortable in the sense that it's almost like we shouldn't be seeing this. So when Roman then grabs Jimmy and starts choking him out, and Jey has to lean forward and say, I quit, he's now an indentured servant to Roman Reigns, which by default means Jimmy Uso also will be as well, because they're brothers and they're going to do that. How they're going to play this out on TV, I don't know. But the fact that the Anoa'i family were there and handed him the lei to show that he is the tribal chief, huge fan of that idea. WWE really pushing the idea that Roman is the number one guy. I'm a huge fan of this story. I think the Usos have looked really strong in this. And some people have said, oh, they're using their real names to look edgy. They're not. This is meant to make you feel like this is not a story. And certainly the way this is being told is different. There was a lot of dialogue in this match, and something that this is one of the comments I made to the producer, Zoe Styles, when we rewatched this match. You couldn't have had this match with an audience. They would have drowned out the dialogue. They would have said what 300 times, and just because they want to be famous. And it's fucking annoying. But it's great that we got this story. Was it too long? Possibly. Maybe 5 minutes shorter, you could have told the same story. But by the end, I felt that I was exhausted. I needed a beat. I needed a chance to just have a breath. And that was what they wanted. They wanted you at the end to just be like, oh my God. And I think they achieved that. Now, the task of following that was handed to Elias and Jeff Hardy. I'm still baffled by the fact that Elias clearly doesn't watch WWE TV, because they've already established it wasn't Jeff Hardy that did the crash. So they still have this story between Elias and Jeff Hardy. Will we get the payoff for this? I hope at some point we find out who it was that actually did cause the accident, because what we feel just now is that it's Sheamus, but hopefully it isn't, so we can actually lead to some kind of big payoff. We then saw The Miz defeat Otis to become the Money in the Bank champion, helped by Tucker, who turned his back on Otis. Now, I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, there's something about Tucker. I think we may see him trim that beard, change his style a little bit, and actually put some self-love into the character. I believe he's a future star. Is he going to be The Rock? No, but I think he's a future star, and I certainly think that was a big moment for everybody concerned. I think The Miz getting that Money in the Bank briefcase is going to be huge. Certainly, the belief is that he may be cashing that in around about Survivor Series, because that would be the same venue and the same date of the year that he cashed in last time. Anyway, we will talk more about that when we get nearer to Survivor Series. We saw Sasha Banks defeat Bayley. And do you know what? A lot of people say this is the match that stole the card. I'm sorry if you think that. You're wrong. Sasha and Bayley had a match that made no sense for me. Let me put it into context for me. If me and Murphy from CWF were to have a match this weekend, I'm certainly not going to be doing a lot of the stupid stuff they were doing. There would be anger there. So you're not going to be trying to do fancy spots. You're going to be trying to pin the person and beat the person. And that's for me the difference between the Roman Reigns and Jey Uso match, where they weren't trying to do arm drags and trying to do funny spots. When Jey Uso did the dive off the top rope, it's because that's his finishing move. That's what he does. Sasha Banks and Bayley was just stuff for the sake of it. The finish was also ridiculous. Her kicking the chair made no difference to the hold she was doing. And I don't get, nor do I feel I ever will get this. Attraction's not the right word, because that feels more of a sexual nature, but I just don't get this love for Bayley and Sasha. I don't rate either of them the way that others do. I don't think they're bad. I think Bayley's a very good wrestler in the ring. Sasha is very capable, but her promos are awful. Her promos are for me unlistenable. Now, this by no means is me saying the match was awful in the sense that it's the worst match of the night, because the worst match of the night's next. But Sasha Banks and Bayley, massively overrated, as was this match. If you believe that this match stole the card, then feel free to message me and explain why. Because if your argument is that it's because of the backstory, then, by the same token, Roman Reigns and Jey Uso match has a much bigger backstory. So I just don't see the appeal. And I think some people have blinkers. I know some people on social media have blinkers on because it's two females and they find them attractive. That is exactly what it is, which for me defeats the purpose. If you're not going to be critical of the match or positive towards the match based on the performance and you're basing it on looks, then, I could never enjoy a match between two men, because I'm a straight married man. Therefore, I'm not attracted to them. The logic makes no sense for me. Anyway, let's move on. Bobby Lashley was the person chosen by the Hurt Business to face a member of Retribution. They happened to choose Slapjack, who is Shane Thorne, who's not a bad wrestler, but this match was awful. It was almost like the guy didn't know how to wrestle. As soon as he got one up on Bobby Lashley, he didn't know what to do. He almost seemed lost. It seemed like he didn't remember any of his training, and he just suddenly started doing very lame looking punches and kicks. It was awful. It's the kind of match you would expect on an indie show with somebody who's in their first or second match. And considering Slapjack looks like a character that was designed for WWE 2K20 by 2K Games, who clearly have no grasp on wrestling. If you've played the game, you'll understand why I say that. The entire match, 3 minutes and 50 seconds of nothing. It was awful. They could have literally had a tag match or had a backstage altercation and achieved more. But then all they've done with Retribution since Ali was revealed as leader is made them look like they couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. If you're building a faction, look at Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan with the NWO, he made sure that nobody touched them. He got them over based on the fact that you just kept putting them over. It's not about winning necessarily as much as it is about people remember what they did. Hence the NWO spray painting. Retribution don't have that tag. They don't have anything. What they have is losing every week and somehow now having a leader that up until a couple of weeks ago was either on TV for a few weeks and then pulled, or put in a gimmick and then pulled. There's been no momentum built for Retribution at all. And the fact that week one of Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, being on Raw, and he destroyed all of Retribution, shows where Retribution are in the totem pole. If you want them to be a threat, make them a threat. If you don't want them to be a threat, squash them and get rid of them, because it's pointless doing what you're doing. Now, Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre. I've been saying for a wee while I thought that Randy would get the belt and Drew would be chasing. I really enjoyed the match, the spot where Drew fell off the cell. It's kind of a homage to Shawn Michaels, and allegedly that's actually the intention. It's meant to seem like it was a homage to Shawn Michaels' fall off the cell. And that's kind of intriguing for me. I'm a big fan when people want to do callbacks to things, and the fact that Shawn Michaels was part of the match for Randy Orton last month, there's quite a lot of interest in storytelling there. Randy getting the belt for me is huge. It opens up so many possibilities, and particularly with The Miz getting the Money in the Bank and the possibility of Survivor Series where he could cash in. For me, the possibility of having Miz as champion again, I'm intrigued, very intrigued. And well, let's move quickly on to Raw, where we had AJ Styles defeat Jeff Hardy to be part of the Raw Survivor Series team. Lucha House Party defeated Akira Tozawa and Drew Gulak. Keith Lee defeated Elias in a qualifying match for the Survivor Series team. The Hurt Business defeated Retribution. Well, I am shocked, in a tag team elimination match. And then we had Drew McIntyre defeat The Miz. Good match. Didn't last very long. I thought it was going to last a lot longer, particularly if you're trying to make The Miz look viable to beat Randy Orton. But then maybe you're going to have Randy be absolutely dead on his feet and Miz comes down and cashes in. Then we saw Lana win a fatal four-way match to join the women's team Raw, which was, of course, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. Wow, her name escaped me there. And we also had Otis's ex-squeeze and Kermit the Frog, who, yes, I know that's not their real names, but Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke. Okay, but I still think that Otis's Squeeze and Kermit the Frog are better names. So they made up the team. Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, Kermit the Frog, and Otis's Squeeze. And we saw Lana win a four-way match with Nikki Cross, Lacey Evans, Peyton Royce, and Lana. Now, I'm going to be honest, as they were entering the ring, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, there's no leader in this match. Peyton Royce probably, on the surface, looks the most experienced. Nikki Cross is a good wrestler. I really like Nikki Cross. I've seen a lot of her stuff when she was here in the UK. For me, though, you got Lacey Evans and Lana, who are both super inexperienced, and I thought this match was going to suck. I really did. Pleasantly surprised. A few moments where it seemed like everybody was a little bit lost, but overall, it was a very good match. We then saw Sheamus defeat Matt Riddle, who is now known as The Riddle. Well, he's known as Riddle, but I think The Riddle sounds better. So Sheamus is now part of Team Raw. We then had confrontation that saw The Fiend and Randy Orton have a little bit of a face-to-face, almost a face-to-face. What was quite interesting here was Randy Orton came out and spoke, Drew McIntyre came down, and then The Fiend showed up. What we saw was The Fiend on the top of the ramp, and as Randy tried to escape from Drew McIntyre, he saw The Fiend and then realized it was probably better to go back and just fight Drew McIntyre than it was to go and fight The Fiend. Great way to get The Fiend over without doing anything. But what we did see was them fighting at the announce table as the show ended. When the show went off the air, what we saw was the use of a pen to stab Randy Orton. So this feud is being ramped up quite a bit. I'm pleasantly surprised by the fact WWE are letting the more brutal side of some of the wrestlers come out. I really hope we step away from the very scripted promos. Drew, for the most part, seems less scripted than before, which I think is a very, very huge deal. Well, hello, welcome. It is Martin's Opinion Corner. Now, I've recorded this several times, and every time I get a little bit angry. So there's quite a few people out there who believe that the AEW ratings demonstrate that AEW is better than NXT. That's, of course, very subjective. If you look at the brands, some people prefer NXT, some people prefer AEW. Both offer something that I like, and both offer something I don't like. But let's look a little bit at this week's ratings. So we do have, for the first time in a little while, the highest rating number for NXT this year, which also happens to be a victory for NXT. 876,000 viewers, a 36% increase on the USA Network, topping the 781,000, which is a 3.7% increase for Dynamite. Now, what's quite interesting here is both shows were up. Both shows can be happy. Their ratings rose this week. That's a victory for both. That's important. When you look at the NXT rating, they'll be very happy they got more people watching their show than were watching Dynamite. People will turn around and argue, oh, yes, but it's a pre-taped show for Dynamite. But most of the NXT shows are pre-taped as well. So the logic there is flawed. What's also quite interesting is I've seen quite a few people who say they know a lot about statistics on Twitter, especially, saying that yes, but AEW put a lot of videos up that mean that people don't have to tune into the shows because they can just catch up on YouTube quickly. Well, by that same logic, WWE do the same thing. So wouldn't they also damage their ratings through putting up those videos? Or does that only apply to one brand? Of course, you can always find an explanation if you're looking for it. So let's look at an explanation. AEW do not have their own network. AEW broadcast on TNT. NXT is broadcast on the USA Network and on the WWE Network. The WWE Network, where people can watch on demand at their leisure, is something that will be the routine for many people. Perhaps they won't have watched NXT on a Wednesday night. Perhaps they watch NXT on a Saturday night with a couple of beers with their friends. Okay, maybe not during the pandemic, but maybe that was the routine and maybe they keep it going. People don't always change their viewing patterns. And if it's available in the same format that you were already viewing it, then why would you go to the USA Network to watch it? Particularly if you worked a Wednesday night in a bar and you're out by 7 o'clock, you're not going to be watching. You're going to be watching on the network because that's where you used to anyway. WWE Network numbers are not necessarily always available. And when they are, it's usually just for certain projects like WrestleMania or the Undertaker documentary. We find out how many people viewed things like that. The AEW NXT argument is also different in another way. If you ignore Finn Balor, who is on around about $1 million a year, he's on a big contract. The vast majority of the NXT roster are still on what would be classed as a developmental deal. They're not on main event money. They're not on main roster money. You look at AEW, who went to AEW are telling you it's the biggest contract they've ever had. How many people in AEW are telling you they're making so much money? Now, this could be bragging. It could be there could be many factors at work here. But importantly, and this is very important, people are very ready to accept that AEW is better than WWE, which is a subjective opinion, without actually looking at the wider picture. AEW have went on a hiring spree and hired lots and lots of wrestlers, and a lot of them are on very big paychecks. This is good security for the boys. Let's not criticize the fact that the boys are getting paid. This is brilliant. Eddie Kingston, for example, somebody I'm very happy is getting a paycheck. Conversely, you look at WWE, and not Cameron Grimes said this week as well. WWE have a lot of training mechanisms, processes in place to try and make people better. You look at the people that have improved under that system, the people that have developed and went on to other things as a part of the developmental system, and you look at the ones who've left it bitter and angry. Even the bitter and angry ones get the rod up their ass wanting to prove WWE wrong. In a way, they gain from being in the system. But when you look, has WWE ruined NXT by moving to USA Network and creating the AEW ratings war? This is an article on Bleacher Report written by the Dr. Chris Mueller, and I'm going to be honest, it's absolute nonsense. The NXT product has not changed drastically at all. The only thing that has changed is that certain people, dickheads like Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez, have told you to focus every week on the ratings on the networks. Neither of them are willing to accept the fact that AEW wins every week. We can't debate that. But NXT also has the network numbers, which we don't know. NXT is also available on demand in every country that has the WWE network. There are also countries that have NXT on television in that country, and people still opt to watch on the network. Why? Because if NXT is broadcast on a Friday night and you work Friday night, you can't watch it. Yes, AEW week by week wins the ratings on the networks. That does not mean more people are watching. Also, when you look at WCW and when they did the Finger Poke of Doom, they had a very high number for that show. But what a lot of people saw turned them off. People have argued that AEW have garnered shows with over 1 million viewers or segments with over 1 million viewers. And that's great. That's brilliant that those talents are getting watched. There's several things that people ignore. And that is the same AEW fans who argue, yeah, but we got over 1 million viewers. You're not part of the team, jackass. AEW did get over 1 million viewers. They got it for one segment, possibly two segments of one show, and never again. If you book something that people really want to see, people will tune in. WWE have done that with Keith Lee's title win and with Halloween Havoc. You book something, you can spike a rating. The difference is keeping that rating. Neither show has done so. And this is the point I want to get to, because people have said I'm too big a WWE fan and I've been too harsh on AEW. Let's be realistic. AEW and WWE NXT, not WWE the main brands, have really struggled to keep the ship steady in recent months. But they also have so many variables that it's impossible to do so. Returning sports are getting different viewership numbers. TV shows are getting different viewership numbers because some people spent 4 or 5 months sat watching TV, and now they only want to do it for a set amount of shows. They don't want to invest all their time. The wrestling landscape is not as one-dimensional as Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez are telling you. WWE especially need to maintain the development of talent And if people believe the focus for NXT is purely on ratings or winning a battle with AEW, I don't think people understand exactly the purpose of the NXT brand. NXT is about getting people ready to actually draw money. I mean, this is a very simple concept to understand. AEW is paying main event money to compete with a brand with people that WWE deemed not good enough to be on national television. People can argue NXT on USA Network is national television. It is a B show. Despite what everybody will tell you, it is a B show. NXT A show is getting comparatively similar numbers to the B show. There is a reason for this. And this is not me trying to insult the AEW brand. I believe AEW have some of the best talent in the world. Pac, Jericho, MJF. I love myself some Matt Hardy. Hangman Page has got potential coming out of his ass. But they also have one really big problem. They told everybody it was going to be the solution, and they haven't been. And the reason is because the boys, when they book the boys, never succeed. Okay, so we have a small clip coming up from our sponsor in a few minutes, but what we also have, importantly, is a big revelation. So I was sent something this week from the Twitter team over at the CWF, Caledonian Wrestling Federation, which was the fact that they were going to be revealing the belt design that they have planned for their top two titles. However, Murphy decided at the last minute that he wasn't going to allow that, and the Twitter team decided to hand that over to me. Now, it would be rude of me if I'm handed something to not share it with everybody. So on that note, I'm going to share 3 different pictures. Now, the first picture is the basic artwork for the CWF title. This is not just going to be used for one title, it's actually going to be used for 2 titles. Now, let me explain how this has been explained to me. Every company seems to want to have vastly different titles, and that's great. CWF want to use a slightly different concept where they're going to use the same belt design pretty much for 2 separate belts. The world title is going to be gold and is going to look like this. And of course, if the gold belt is the main belt, then your secondary title has to be silver, because that's how the medal system works in the Olympics. By the same logic, the tag titles are going to be bronze. So it is going to be at least a slight nod to how the medal system works. It's going to be seen as a ranking system for the belts. Yes, that does mean the world title's at the top, the middle title's silver, and then bronze is the tag title. But that is kind of the order of things in many companies. I'm very excited by these designs. They're very simplistic, but also get across exactly what CWF is about. The other thing that's quite interesting is I was told that the CWF tag team title design is still being worked on, but it's something that hopefully people are going to be very impressed by. I don't know if I'm going to get to reveal those, but if I do, I will let you all know. As soon as I find out what they look like, I will share artwork for them as well. So that is the exclusive that we have for CWF this week. Hopefully, if they are running shows, we can get some exclusives in terms of venues and some talents. I'm told I will be receiving them officially from Stuart Murphy, but before we get more exclusives, let's head over to a small clip from Stuart Murphy and see what he has to say.
Headlocks and Headphones does not endorse this advert, but is damn sure approved by CWF.
I want to mend an olive branch because my man has it in his head that I'm this evil boss, so I want to extend an olive branch to 2 people who think that I'm an evil boss. From Headlocks and Headphones to JJ Andrews, who thinks I'm against them, and I'm really, really not. So to prove I'm not against anyone, here's what my offer is. Martin Anderson, I would like you to be on the very first show of CWF in the ring with myself and JJ Andrews for a contract signing. That's right, I'm inviting JJ Andrews to sit down with me in the ring at show 1 and sign an official CWF contract. And I want you, Martin Anderson, to be there to officiate it. Make sure nothing gets out of hand. That's my olive branch to you.